How's it going, everyone? I'm Mistakes Were Made, and today we'll be making a Southeast Asian shrimp po' boy or a honey walnut shrimp banh mi. We'll have 4 main recipes, and while I go over those recipes, I will explain to you some mistakes that I made, hence the name, and how to rectify them so you can cut down on food waste and to make yourself a better chef. And you'll want to follow these tips, because do you want your bread to be like this? Sad? Flat? Or do you want it to be like this? Now, the 4 main recipes that we'll have today is the pickled vegetables for the banh mi, though you can really sub out the brine to be used for anything. Then you'll be learning to make a banh mi bread, which is a special type of bread, has a egg shell thin crust. Just think of bread from Ratatouille. Then we'll be making a honey walnut shrimp, which is a classic Hong Kong dim sum dish. And finally, we'll be making a mayo to replace part of the sauce in the honey walnut shrimp for the sandwich. Now, before we make the bread, let's make the pickled vegetables, since it's better made ahead of time. Now we're going to start out with 1 daikon radish and 1 carrot to emulate the pickled vegetables on a banh mi. But you can use this basic brine that I teach you for any vegetable you may want to pickle and add to a sandwich. So once you have peeled the vegetables, you can continue to use the peeler to cut it into thin sheets. You can also use a mandolin, but it won't be as thin. Then you'll want to add about 1 tablespoon of salt to draw out the liquid in the vegetables. Let it sit for about 30 minutes to an hour, and then wring out the vegetables using a towel or a cheesecloth. If you julienne the vegetables, which is cutting it into like matchsticks, you should not squeeze them, and you should not be squeezing the vegetables as hard as I did or as much as I did. So while your vegetables are sitting, you're going to dissolve half a cup of sugar into 3/4 of a cup of both water and vinegar. I wouldn't recommend boiling it because it may reduce the crispiness of your pickles. You can add other seasonings to the pickles, but I just kept it simple for the video. Make sure to taste them afterwards to see if they need any more salt or any more sugar. It'll all be up to your taste. To start the bread, you'll need to measure out 200 grams of cold water and add it to the bowl. You'll also want to add 1 egg, 8 grams of instant yeast, 2 grams of salt, 2 grams of sugar, 1 gram of ascorbic acid, also known as vitamin C powder. Just get an unflavored version. You also want to measure out another 60 grams of cold water to add for later. Add 450 grams of flour, combine with a fork, and then turn on your stand mixer on low for about 7 minutes. Now during those 7 minutes is when you will want to add more water so all the dry flour on the sides of your mixing bowl is incorporated into the dough. The reason you might not want to add it all initially is because of variability in pressure and humidity that will affect how your dough comes out. Once the 7 minutes have elapsed, you will then want to bump up the speed to medium for about 5 minutes. Now the reason you might want to add the ascorbic acid to your dough is it helps beginner bakers like myself get enough gluten development without worrying about overworking the dough like I did the first time, making them so flat. Once your 5-minute timer goes off, then you'll want to turn the mixer on to high for about 2 minutes. Now to test if your dough is ready, slowly pull and stretch the dough between your fingers, trying to spread it as thin as possible. You basically want to spread it until you can almost see through it like a pane of glass, and that should mean that you've developed enough gluten. If it breaks any time before that, put that all back into the mixer and turn it back onto high for another minute. After you're done mixing, you're going to take the dough out of the stand mixer and slap and fold it on a lightly oiled work surface into a rough ball and cover for 20 minutes with either a cloth. After the 20 minutes of resting, divide the dough into 6 pieces, about 120 grams each, then cover them with an oiled piece of cling film for about 15 minutes. Now before we shape out the baguettes, lightly oil a baguette pan or try to emulate one with foil like I did. Now to make the baguette pan shape, you will want to fold it into thirds, and using the creases where you folded it to act as the walls. You may want to add some foil in between that to act as stability, and then just put that on a sheet tray. After you've oiled your work surface again, you're going to want to roll your dough out into a triangular shape facing away from you, with the singular point being about 1 inch thick and the 2 bottom points being as thin as you can make them, about half a centimeter to a quarter of a centimeter thin. So then you're going to want to take the fatter point of the triangle and essentially roll it as tight as you can, sealing the edges off over itself towards the back parts until it makes a eye or baguette-ish rectangular shape. There will be a link in the description with the original video that should be a bit more clear on the instructions of how to roll it. So once you've rolled out all 6 of your baguettes, you'll want to place them in an oven with the light on for about 1 hour to proof. You'll want to spray the baguettes with water every 15 minutes or until it has risen 2.5 to 3 times. If your dough hasn't risen, it means that you probably overworked it. Once your bread is done proofing, you're going to want to take the baguettes out of the oven and place one rack in the middle and place another rack below that about halfway between the floor of the oven and the other rack. You'll then want to place 2 sheet trays or cake pans on the bottom rack and the floor of the oven and heat the oven up to 450 degrees. While your oven is preheating, you'll want to score the bread with a bread lamb or a razor and bring a pot of around 500 milliliters of water to a boil. Once your oven is done preheating, you're going to want to throw the baguettes into the middle rack of the oven and pour the boiling water onto the hot pan in the bottom rack to make steam, and then close the oven and bake for 8 minutes. After the 8 minutes, you'll want to open the oven, being careful of the steam that will flood out, and remove the pan, making sure that there's no steam left in the oven, and then close it back up and bake for another 8 minutes to brown and set the crust. After they're done baking, put them on a wire rack to cool. If you notice that there's slight cracking around the side, that's completely normal and there's nothing to worry about. Now, to make the standard sauce for honey walnut shrimp, you'll want to combine 6 tablespoons of mayo. I prefer Kewpie, but you can use any mayo that you want. Then you'll want to add about 3 tablespoons of sweetened and condensed milk and 3 to 4 teaspoons of lemon juice. You want to mix that all together and make sure to taste it because it all may vary depending on the brands that you use. Now, to make the sauce for the sandwich, I'm going to be replacing the mayo in the standard honey walnut shrimp sauce with a homemade charred jalapeno and garlic mayo. Now, to make a basic mayo, you're going to want to combine 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard, 1 egg, 1 tablespoon of vinegar or any citrus juice, any seasonings you want, salt, pepper, and about half a cup of oil per yolk that you add. Now, the way I recommend to emulsify the mayo is to use a stick blender. Just add the oil in about 5 small batches, totaling 1/4 of a cup of oil, making sure that the oil is completely combined with the other ingredients before you add the next batch. You should then be able to add the last 1/4 of a cup in about 3 batches, which should make a thick mayo. The other way is to use a whisk. You'll have to slowly stream in as little oil as you can while vigorously beating it into the ingredients to emulsify it. You'll want to make sure to take breaks while you're pouring the oil to make sure that all the oil is incorporated, because if you add too much oil too quickly, the emulsion will break and split. Now, I usually add garlic to my mayos, but traditionally it's without it. I find it gives it a better flavor and it helps with the emulsification process. Now, a little tip for when you're charring the jalapenos, I would use a cast iron pan, and once you have sufficiently charred them, put them in some foil to let them steam for about 15 minutes to fully cook through the pepper. Like the honey walnut shrimp sauce, add sweetened condensed milk and lemon juice. Now, I also added a bit of pre-made mayo because I didn't cook my vegetables through fully. This was mostly just to add a little bit of stability. If you're making all the food the same day, you'll want to peel, devein, and salt your shrimp with about 2 tablespoons of salt while your dough is resting. Now, before we do any frying, let's go over some frying safety. You'll want to use a wok or a heavy bottom pot, anything that has ample room. You'll then only want to fill it up a little bit over half and a bit under 2/3, just so you have enough space to fry, but not too much oil that when you add something, it overflows and causes a grease fire. Now, you'll be frying your shrimp at around 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 176 degrees Celsius. To make the batter, you'll need to combine 1 cup of all-purpose flour, half a cup of cornstarch, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 1 tablespoon of oil, 1 egg, 2 big pinches of salt, and about 12 ounces of cold seltzer water. You want to mix until there's few lumps remaining, but you don't want to overmix it to develop too much gluten, which will mess with the frying. You can also add any spices you want to the shrimp. Just make sure that it does not clash with your sauce. Once your oil is almost up to temperature, throw your shrimp into the batter and make sure to fully coat them. Once the oil is at 350, safety, you'll want to start dropping the shrimp in away from you to avoid splashing oil on yourself. You'll then let them cook for about 3 minutes to cook the shrimp through and to set the crust. You'll want to fry in batches until you have fried all of your shrimp once. You'll then want to bump the temperature up to anywhere from 375 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which should be around 190 to 200 degrees Celsius. Once you've gotten to the desired temperature, throw your shrimp back into the oil for about 1 minute until the crust is glassy and golden brown. Now, because your shrimp aren't going to be as cold as they were initially, you can put more shrimp into the fryer on the second batch to do it in less batches. Just be sure not to overfill your pan for safety. Another key component of honey walnut shrimp is obviously the walnuts, and to prepare them I have 2 ways to do that. The first is at 300. You should fry your walnuts until they're golden brown. You want to make sure that you keep an eye on them because they burn very quickly, and make sure to do them after the shrimp because they release a lot of sediment. So once you're done frying, you're gonna have to dispose of your oil. There are 2 ways I would recommend doing that. First is get something that may solidify it and then throw it in the trash. The second way is to reclaim the oil by passing it through a fine mesh sieve or a cheesecloth into another container. You'll then want to put what you fried in it, when you fried with it, and how many times you've used it before, just to make sure you're not getting off flavors in the next time you fry. Especially, you do not want rancid oil. After you're done frying, we can plate up the honey walnut shrimp. To do that, take some of your shrimp, toss it in the honey walnut shrimp sauce, add some walnuts, serve it with a bed of rice, and garnish with some green onions. You can also serve with steamed broccoli, which is a common choice among restaurants. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's move on to the sandwich. The first thing I would recommend you to do after splitting the sandwich like a sub is to take out the center of the bread to reduce on some of the breadiness of the sandwich as an entirety to fit more toppings into the sandwich. I will then top it up with a spread of mayo or the sauce, some pickled vegetables, and then since I'm emulating a banh mi, I will use cilantro, raw jalapenos, and I would have used raw cucumber, but I didn't have any. It would have really helped balance out the dish by giving it a bit more lightness. And there you have it. That's how you can make a delicious, crispy honey walnut shrimp banh mi. I hope you enjoyed watching and learned a few tips to help you later. Remember, cooking is all about learning and experimenting. It's okay if you mess up because that's how we improve. If you try this recipe, I'd love to hear how it turned out or any tweaks that you made to make it your own. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button, and if there's any dish you'd like to see me make or any questions, please leave a comment down below or on any of my other socials. If you want to see more recipes, make sure to subscribe, and thank you and see you next week.